I'd ask for a motion to reconvene into open session.
So moved. Jeff, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Order of business, I don't think any issues
Well,
with
actually, the only thing I'd suggest is, because we had an interest from Sarah that
Mhm.
might be coming,
Mhm.
that if, I would guess if she's coming, she'll get here before then, but if we get to that item
Sure.
and
we
she's
can
not
do it.
here, that we just put it off.
Yep, sure.
That's all.
Sorry, public appearances, none today. I'd like to ask for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Been moved and
Second.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is recognition. And I have one because they sent me a nice letter, and I'd like to congratulate our very own Jared Rosing for being awarded the 2019 Mike Rochar Wasbo Shining Star Award. He can collect that award at the fall meeting of the Wisconsin Association of Business Officials in October.
At the Moose House.
Congratulations, Jared. You are our shining star. Anyone else?
Well, I know it says publicly, but we want to add that it's because of his performance above and beyond with the WASBO Association and the caliber of his work there. Just
Great job.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Also, we had
Not seeing it.
two of our basketball players, name just went out my head, but they were, one was voted for the girls' team.
McKenna
Oh,
Warner.
Arnold.
McKenna.
Yeah.
She
She
is
was-
the,
She was the one going to Iowa.
yep, she is the Player of the Year of Wisconsin.
McKenna Warnock.
Mhm.
Yes. So she is Player of the Year for Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that
So congratulations to her.
this past week.
Okay, so I do have a few others. And so there is information on your board docs, a little bit more detail about McKenna and her award. So yeah, we certainly congratulate her. Congratulations to this year's DECA team that attended the state competition in Lake Geneva this week. Team members brought back a number of individual and team awards. In addition, Allie Gibbons and Anna Brown qualified to represent Wisconsin DECA in the Buying and Merchandising Operations Research event at the International Competition in Orlando, Florida next month. Recently, the Monona Grove Forensics team competed in the WHSFA district tournament at McFarland High School. And after 3 exciting rounds, all 7 of MG's team members advanced to the state forensics tournament to be held in April at UW-Madison. Please congratulate Sydney Dean, Kylie Hallenstein, Sophia Brandt, Grant Reinhardt, Sky Liston, Katie Wallner, Lydia Miller, and Sarah Fallberg for an outstanding job. And your special note, you may recall Sarah is the student that appeared before the board last week with regard to the board membership. And lastly, Madison Ice Diamonds pre-juvenile synchronized figure skating team recently won their national championship. That's not a school club, however, we have one of our students that excelled, so we thought it was worth mentioning. MG 7th grader Mackenzie Meyer has been a member of the team for 4 years and finished first in all their competitions leading up to this national title. And there's information and a link from the local news story. And a special note, Mackenzie is the daughter of Heather Meyer, who is our business services specialist in the district. So congratulations to Mackenzie.
Okay. Thank you. Additional correspondence and announcements?
I bought my musical tickets opening night.
Oh,
So shout out to everybody there.
musical,
The Music Man.
Music Man.
That's nice.
Did you get your tickets?
I did.
Me too.
Opening
Me
night.
too. Me too.
Administrative reports, Dan?
Nothing additional tonight.
Okay, board reports, teaching, learning and equity. Eric?
We met on the 5th of March. We had a really good discussion and highlighted some things, some topics, themes that came up in professional development, hiring more diverse teaching staff, our district message, and increasing community engagement. We're going to continue the discussion at our next meeting on April 2nd, and hopefully come up with some, the beginning process of making some recommendations to the board.
Yeah,
Sue?
and that was the one thing I realized when I got home. We didn't talk about that April 2nd date because I definitely conflict with that. It's the election day and I work the polls that day.
You're right, so.
And I had meant
we
to
might
bring it up
wanna
and we didn't actually talk about it in the
confer
agenda,
maybe.
so.
Yeah,
Reschedule if we can.
I think if we choose a date, we need to maybe
Yeah.
perhaps just send it out.
Because I'd like you to be there.
We could just send, yeah, and different dates. You could send a couple out to the polls.
I'll do that.
Thanks.
Okay. Possible action items, the policy revision, second reading. There's a number of policies that have been updated. The list is in the board docs.
I did kind of look through those again to see if there were any that say I didn't really see any, but if anybody has any questions.
If there's no comments, I'd ask for a motion for approval of the revised policies as presented.
I
So-
will move that the policies be approved as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 2018-19 collective bargaining agreement with MGEA education assistance.
So, yeah, it's not, pretty self-explanatory. Bargain the maximum allowed of CPI of 2.13 for base wages, and the MGAEA's recently ratified. And, with regard to the timing of why, now most of our discussions were really, discussing the supplemental, the base wages is pretty straightforward.
This is approval of the current year's
Correct.
salary.
Not the 2019.
That's right. Is the year
Okay. I would move approval of the 2018-19 collective bargaining agreement with MGEA Educational Assistance as presented.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Derek wins.
Oh, man. Let's go to the tape.
Discussion?
There's the reasoning for the approval late in the school year is because,
We were unable to reach an agreement until now.
And they also certified late, didn't they?
No, the year
They-
before.
Oh, it was the year before,
Yeah.
sorry. That's right, you're right. It was like last year.
okay.
And what happens is that if any pay adjustments, teachers are made whole, or I'm sorry, in this case it's the EAs, but they're made whole on any adjustments. They started this year with their salaries from last year, and then when this comes through, they are adjusted appropriately, so that they're as if they're paid for the whole year.
Is it typical for us to approve it later in the year? Does that happen
Yeah.
often?
Way too often.
This offer that has been ratified was the board's initial offer way back in the fall, and was not accepted until now.
But not accepted by the
The
MGE.
It wasn't.
Educational assistant.
Yeah, it has to be ratified.
Right. So they, what you're saying is, they didn't, it was accepted in the fall. We submitted in the fall, but they didn't ratify it till recently.
Correct.
When did they ratify it? Do you know the date?
Just, I believe, March 1st.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And then the 2018-19 educational assistance is supplemental pay.
And the recommendation is for approval of supplemental pay, which would bring all EAs up to a total compensation of the base plus supplemental up to 2.5%, which is in line with what the board approved for the other bargaining unit teachers as well as non-represented staff.
Discussion? I'd ask for a motion for approval of the 2018-19 educational assistance supplemental pay as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second? Jeff?
Second, kind of that.
Uh, Discussion? Same. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 1920 preliminary certified staffing plan. Move out of the past into the future.
Okay, so we talked about this at the last board meeting and mentioned that the major change to this year were the increase in positions for the expansion of MG21 to the middle level, as well as those support positions that have in the past been shared with the high school, specifically special education teacher and social worker. So we're recommending increases in FTE there as well, so they no longer would have shared in those positions, so it would actually increase at both buildings. And then the adjustment on this one, since the last board meeting, is high school students have now completed their course requests. Principal Bross has had a chance to meet with all the departments to look at the course requests and look at the staffing needs in order to meet those requests. And you'll see just a couple slight adjustments based upon that. And oh boy, did the wrong one get attached? I don't see any adjustments.
Change?
The
It
update.
says-
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm
it
looking
says
at the old
change.
one, okay.
Okay, the update, yeah.
And okay, they're both on there, the old one? Okay, thank you. So the only adjustment is for world languages that based on course enrollments, a slight reduction of 0.5 FTE for high school Spanish. And if you might wonder how that will be dealt with, there's a couple different scenarios we have, we'll look at, but we have sometimes between GDS and high school shared staff. To be fair, it could potentially mean a reduction in contract or FTE, somewhere. But at this point, that's what is required in order to run the courses that were selected.
So is any of the MG21 positions part of the grant or not?
No, we cannot use the grant money for salaries.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And another question. This is. I would like to see. I don't know if you've thought about anything like. We've talked about a youth advocate, and maybe a restorative justice coordinator, like something to deal with children on a social emotional level basis.
What I can tell you is we have had some discussions specifically at GDS for some support positions. Those went beyond this plan because those won't be necessarily certified positions. And the other thing I guess I would say is this is still, we titled it a preliminary plan with the idea we can always make adjustments, but the real purpose of having the board approve this is so there aren't any surprises, so that when we bring a teaching contract to you in a month or two for an MG21 teacher, you know why. So to answer your question specifically, Jeff, we've had that conversation about at the middle level thus far.
Because I'm super excited we haven't had expulsion this year.
So am I.
So,
I love it.
yeah, me too. But, I don't expect that to last forever, so I would like to see
Yeah.
us get ahead of the game. So,
Okay. Then I'd ask for a motion for approval of the 1920 preliminary certified staffing plan as presented.
So moved.
It's been moved
second.
and seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. So if there's no objection, I'm going to move the next item, the student board representative discussion, down the list until, because Sarah expressed interest in being here for that discussion. Which takes us, and somebody remind me to bring it up again if I forget. That takes us to a discussion of policy 7440.01, video surveillance and electronic monitoring. There was some interest in the discussion on this topic in our last meeting. Anyone want to start? I'm
Do
looking
we
at you,
have
Jeff.
any, I'm hoping we have some statistics, like instead of saying, well, people just want it, how much have we used it? Have we used it for anything specifically? Has it actually done anything for us? Is it?
Sure. So I guess first of all, to be clear, this is nothing, the district has had video surveillance in schools for many, many years, well before I started in the district. So all that changed this year is we upgraded an outdated system, and then there were additional cameras placed based on that we didn't have full coverage in some of the areas previously. So that's the only thing that has changed. This policy was adopted as part of the Neola conversion. To be fair, prior to that, we really didn't have a policy that had really any guidelines. So, this, as you know, creates some about when and where it can be used and so on. To answer your question specifically, that's something I don't have a report to share. What I can tell you anecdotally in talking to the principals is that they all use it on a regular basis, not only at the high school level, at all levels, even elementary. That anytime there is some sort of an incident or occurrence, in those areas where there might be a student injury, or it could be, worst case scenario, fight, that type of thing. It's an opportunity to go then back and look and see what really happened.
Right. Can there be? Has there been? Like, I don't know how we have this discussion without actual evidence and data. Like, we don't make any decisions without any data. But anecdotal, like, I don't know how. Like, has there been any of that? I mean, like, that's.
Have they used it, or?
Yeah, have they used it? What do they use? Have they actually used it? Not what could
Yes,
we use it
no,
for?
what they have.
Has it actually worked that way? I
Yes.
mean, do we use it to spy on kids? Do we do? I mean, is there how many fights do we have that they've been able to figure out who started the fight or whatever? Because there's no audio, so you can't tell any of that, right?
Correct.
Right. So, and I mean, to be honest, I put it on Facebook, and I'm sure some of you guys have seen it. And the overwhelming majority is we need cameras, but that's a societal thing. But I don't stand alone here to thinking that maybe we need to rethink about what we do with cameras, because I've had a lot of people contact me separately, and I've had some teachers contact me and say, one thing we really, really want to do is build trust. And it's hard to build trust when there's cameras everywhere. Like, they told me they would never go to the camera. They want to work out stuff in their classroom as part, because they're there as teachers, not as police, saying, I'm going to get you this time.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess.
Well, the policy is very specific
Right.
about who has access.
Right. But
I know.
but it doesn't. It's yeah. But it still is a watching thing. And I've talked to some students, and they're like, well, I think they're stupid, but everything bad happens in the bathroom anyway, and there's no cameras in there. So
No, the practice is not to watch live feed. None of the
Right.
principals have time for that, nor
Right.
is there any purpose for
Right.
it. So it's generally always going back when there's something needs to be reviewed to pull the tape.
that's my question. How often do we do things that need to be reviewed, and what kind of things need to be reviewed besides a fight?
Okay. So if you'd like specifics, then we
Yeah.
need to invite the principals in to
Yeah.
speak to those. So I can tell you, when I mentioned anecdotally, in talking to the principals, they all use it on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any discussion with any principals about this?
I have not had a discussion.
That might recommend that.
I mean, are you?
Hang on a second, Eric. Hang on a second, Susan.
A couple things. One, I thought that some of the cameras were purchased recently or upgraded recently as part of the safety grant we got from the
Correct.
state, right? So that paid for it? Because in your Facebook page, I know you mentioned cost, and we've had them so long and that we've just replaced them that I don't know that I think the cost is substantial, and some of it was with that grant of the recent ones. Secondly, my understanding, because you mentioned a teacher complaint on your Facebook page, and my understanding of that was that when the administrators went to various schools just to talk and observe some classrooms and just talk about how things were going, that in two schools, somebody asked about cameras because they had seen the new ones going in, or the upgrades, and they just wanted to know where they were concerned that they were going in classrooms or something, and as soon as they realized they were only in the hallways and the entryways, they were good with them. They just wanted to be reassured that they're not being used to watch them for observation purposes, and the policy very clearly says they won't be used that way. And it says that in general, they're destroyed after 30 days, unless one is used as part of some discipline thing that becomes part of the student record, then we have to keep it, but otherwise, they're destroyed. So it's not.
So I have a question
It's
about
a little
that too.
different, so.
So they aren't in the classrooms, but they're in the gyms, which is the classroom for our gym teachers. So they technically are in classrooms for certain teachers, which goes against policy.
Is that a violation of the policy?
No, policy specifically states that it can be in the gyms.
Yeah, it says gymnasiums, cafeterias, libraries, where students are permitted to freely come and go.
But during classes, they aren't really come and go, right?
But they're not in the classroom.
But
No, they're in the gym.
they're in the gym,
class.
which is the classroom to the gym teacher.
Yeah, but then when you have an athletic event, they have to be in there. That's why it's
Right.
in there.
Can you turn them off and on, is the question, I guess.
You
'Cause
can.
if they're on during the day, during gym class, then they're on during a classroom. You know?
But again, no one is watching them 24/7.
Right,
So it's just on,
right,
recording, but ain't nobody watching.
right.
And that's all in everybody's gym in pretty much every school in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I've always felt that everybody does it is a terrible reason for us to do anything.
But we're lucky that we have a safe school so far. We haven't had no expulsions, we haven't had no fights, anything. So, we need to count our blessings that none of this has happened. Not like other school districts that are going through a lot of things and they need those cameras because we need the help in my situation and in Madison. So I know that you got some constituents out there kind of worried thinking it's a spy game. It's not. They need to understand the safety. And I tell them that they can come and email me. I tell them it's about safety. I'm ex-military. I'm about safety. Because we don't know. We can't risk anything because we don't know what's going to happen. But we are doing great. So I'm going to stick with this policy.
Eric?
I also agree with the policy. I guess my question, Jeff, for you is, regarding the policy, is your concern with the right that we're authorizing the use of video surveillance, or is it with who is responsible for where they go and when they go there?
I guess that's the whole video surveillance. Like, I don't know exactly. I would like to know how many cameras we have, where they are. Because I think that I've always felt if we treat kids like criminals, they're going to act like criminals. And there's a lack of trust there if everywhere we go, like, there's cameras. Everywhere you go, there's cameras because we want to get them, we want to catch
But
them.
are you saying that you don't want the cameras in?
I'm saying I would prefer that, but I understand, like, I respect the people on my Facebook. I know that that's not going to happen. I just would like a little bit more accountability and information on what's going on with those cameras.
And how would you do that?
I guess some reports. How many cameras do we have? Where are they? What have they actually caught with them? I mean, I think those are important things for us to know as a community. I mean, it's easy to say, like, everyone's like, we need TSA because they keep us safe. But do they really keep us safe? Like, nobody really knows when they do, So, I mean, to say cameras are everywhere in society, well, crime isn't down. I mean, what has that really
Actually,
done?
it is, but
Well,
Is it possible to, Dan, is it possible to get a list of the camera locations in schools?
Yes.
so, I just think I don't want to get to all existential here. I think it's sad as a society we've given up complete right to privacy, and I think that there has to be some accountability to that to see what we're actually doing with those cameras. That's all.
So,
there, yeah.
okay, 2 comments. First of all, yes, we can show you the map. Essentially, what it's going to show is all the hallways.
Right.
I mean, it is. Jeff, in all due respect, I take exception to one of the comments you made. We are not treating children like criminals. We're telling them this is a safe place for you, okay? And that is not the message that is being sent to students.
Well, I think cameras on them tells you that we're ready for you to commit a crime. So that's how I see it. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, I don't know. Like, as somebody who's been here 7 years and we've done some expulsions, I don't know that cameras have ever made a difference that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, there was a couple where, we saw them walking this way, but the camera didn't say, oh yeah, they're on camera, so we got to, it's here, hard line. It hasn't seemed like, I don't know what it's done. So.
That's true, and I don't know if that means in the future it might not be useful. I don't know that. I think they're there. When I drive up to Walgreens and park, there's a big sign there that says there's video surveillance here. And it does make me feel like a criminal. I just think, yeah, okay. I mean, and I get it. I know that there are concerns, there are equal concerns with all the Alexas and all the things that people are tying into the internet with their houses. And I mean, I think there are some big things that we should be thinking about. That our legislators should be thinking about in terms of privacy. But I think cameras in schools just seem so innocuous. They've been there for so long. We've been using them for so many years. There can be issues in the halls. There can be fights, and maybe we haven't had to use a camera to figure it out, but it might be useful sometime. And since it's on a loop and we destroy it and then it keeps going, and then, we could hear if the board feels they want to hear a report, or you could sit down with, I don't know, we can talk about that later, but, my feeling is that they're I don't think most kids even think about them, even though there are signs that say they're there and we tell them, but I think it's like in shopping malls, they are kind of everywhere, like it or not, and I don't think people go around worrying about that. I just don't think they feel like criminals, and that's certainly not why we have them there. I mean, it's more for someone who might break in sometime or something like that. It's not because we're really expecting to catch kids. I mean, that's not, it's just there to help in case we can use it for something. And I don't see it as a problem, and since they're already there, it probably costs us more money to take them down than.
Right, but then we added to it, so maybe a little
Right, with the
concerned
safety
about
funds,
it.
correct, with the safety
Enter.
grants, right.
Now, I know you asked the superintendent about the cameras and stuff. Do you have a percentage of the students and teachers that are asking about the
No,
cameras?
I haven't.
Can you produce that?
No, I can't. Because I can't survey every teacher and student to see what they think.
You got a job to do.
I think the only other comment I want to make is the Facebook page, is to just go back to that comment about the teacher. It wasn't, my understanding was it wasn't teachers complaining about the cameras, and that's how it was presented on Facebook. And I do think it's important that as board members, if we're going to post things, that we are accurate.
I thought,
And
I
it
put
wasn't
it
accurate, it was
as
they
a teacher,
raised
it
a
was a
question.
complaint at a couple of schools.
Well, not that.
Right, well, we don't need
So
to.
maybe we're parsing words here, but I just think it's important to be accurate.
Here's my thoughts on it. I understand that it's an issue of computing. It's a little bit of concern, and I'm always for more information. And the way I would like to see the policy, change the policy, is just that when cameras are added, that's reported to the board. If we do that, just so that so that it happens, that we can look at that and get a feeling. Well, if there's any reason to be concerned about why something might go too far or be something particularly concerning. I think that if we do get that, there'll be less concern for this board if we have that information, and we have the assurance that we're going to hear about it when something is added. So what I would propose is that the policy would be amended just to say that when cameras are added, that's reported to the board.
Doesn't it,
It does not require that.
well,
Yeah, and I guess I want to ask, when you say if it would relieve the board's concerns, I'm not sure I'm hearing concerns from the whole board. I'm hearing one concern, but mostly.
But again, you don't have the.
But I'm just saying, so I'm not sure that's an accurate statement, but I don't personally feel the need to know when they add more, because they're limited to these locations, and I'm assuming anything they're going to put in is going to go in those locations, because that's what they're limited to. So I don't really need to see it come to us.
I've said 100 times.
Hang on.
Okay.
Right,
Anybody
but
else have any
that's all.
thoughts on whether that's appropriate, that the board would be notified, Susan?
Actually, I did some research on this because I thought it would just be interesting to see because of the school safety issue. And basically, they did some studies in Arkansas, Colorado, Louisiana, Kentucky, and Mississippi. And the research basically found that by using video cameras in the basic entrances and hallways, that students and teachers felt safer. They found that on survey. That in fact the teachers appreciated the increased sense of security. They appreciated the measures that the school were taking to reduce school violence and increase school safety. There was another study out of Thomasville City School and University of Mississippi. And they specifically said the things were identified in the data was that the cameras contributed to the overall security of a school in relation to bad behaviors, because it deterred bad behaviors, visitor management, and monitoring door access and safety. Several of the schools also saw a reduction in property damage, bullying, and vandalism. So I mean, they did do some research on it to try and balance out that feeling of, and they specifically talked about the balance between safety and privacy. And apparently, when they did the surveys and they did the data studies, that's what some of their findings were. So the impression in these states is that the cameras made the teachers and the students feel safer. They're just studies.
Susan?
Well, and actually that reminds me of, and this happened a really long time ago, when I was teaching at Winnequa, we did have a break-in one weekend, and somehow I don't think we had the alarm system at that point, that's how long ago it was. And there was a lot of vandalism done within the building. Not enough that we had to cancel school next day, but enough that a couple of rooms couldn't be used, I think. And eventually they found the people, and one was a student, a couple were from a different district, but had there been, I mean, that's when we went to secure doors and alarms for one thing, but had there been cameras, that would have been easier too. I mean, so it's just, that's a fluke thing, hasn't happened for 20 years, probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago at least. But that's the kind of rare thing that it could be helpful for, you know, and given that it's pretty obvious.
Given your true concerns about the value of the points you've raised about the value of the video cameras, I would think you would want to hear from the administration where we have them, so that you can make a judgment.
I'm
where we have them.
satisfied with the explanation I have right here in policy.
Okay.
I mean, I just am, but that's just,
And-
I feel the
As
rest
I've
of
said
it-
it many times, none of this is personal. It's like, because there'll be time when we're not all here, there'll be all new people. That doesn't mean that they're going to be following, like, so I mean, a simple, this is where we did, this is where it is. I mean, I'm assuming, Dan put it right, I'm assuming the next guy that comes in, or woman, will put him in the right street.
Well,
That
they
doesn't
do-
mean
they
it's
have
going
to
to
follow
happen.
policy. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
they-
because
they-
nobody has
hang
ever
on.
broken policy.
Well-
But I will say that
For
the research
example.
I've looked at is the way to make a school safer is to soften it up, not harden it up.
Why don't you
And
use,
we aren't doing any softening, we're
Right.
doing all hardening.
Hold on. I mean, the discussions of the value of video cameras, there's,
Right.
we didn't clear that. I'd like to know if there's any interest in the board of, if anybody on the board, that the policy requires just reporting to the board of the addition of cameras. And Eric, you got your hand up.
I'm okay with the policy. I'll vote to support it. I think if you, Jeff, have a concern, you should make a motion to do an amendment to it.
Do an amendment to the
Well,
policy.
yeah, if you want to make it so that we're notified where the cameras are, you should make an amendment and change it. Or make a motion to change it.
Rather than make a motion to change the policy, well, he could make a motion to change the policy. I would recommend to make a motion to refer to the policy committee to add language to,
Same, yeah.
to add that the board report, that the administration report to the board when there's addition of cameras.
I would make a motion that goes back to policy committee to add
To refer to the policy
Right,
committee.
to refer to policy committee, add language that the board gets informed, the board and the community, because informing us informs the community.
That's
That,
fine.
right, that as more, as
And the
we
board is-
purchase more
The
cameras.
board is informed when
board is-
cameras are added.
Because I'll tell you, a lot of people told me, thanks for bringing it up, this is probably something we should talk about before we, it's a good discussion to have.
So did everybody understand his motion?
Mhm.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion?
My concern with that, Jeff, is that we don't necessarily want, we don't want people necessarily to know where all the cameras are, because if there was a safety concern with an active shooter or someone, and someone was planning that, and they knew exactly where everything is, then that would put the students in school at risk, because they would know where the cameras are. I think there would be some security concerns I would have with that.
But pretty much every school shooter comes from that community, so they would know where everything is. Because, I mean, we don't hide them, right? There are no hidden cameras, to my knowledge.
Right.
So it's not that hard for them to figure it out. I mean, which is like the guy in Florida knew the training drill because he went to that school and worked through the training drill. So I can't think of any school shooting where somebody didn't have a connection to that school. So
Well, I don't know what that, but I'm going to vote to support the policy as it's written. So I will be voting no on the motion.
Anyone else?
Do you want to read the motion again?
Jeff Simpson moved to refer to the policy committee to add that administration inform the board and the community when additional cameras are added.
Did you mean it to say board and community or just board?
Board,
Okay.
which informs the community, hopefully.
Just board.
Okay.
Yep.
By putting that in the policy.
Right.
Anyone else?
I just think, I mean, I don't think we can get too much information ever,
Not
especially in a,
gonna-
when that's a stated goal of our, of the board. is
Yeah.
more informed.
Yeah, I also think more information is better. Okay, so, anyone else?
And I'm assuming we probably won't be adding cameras for a while,
I hope not.
except for, right, so it could all be mute, but
Okay, all in favor?
I'd like a roll call vote.
okay.
Okay, roll call vote, starting with Eric.
Hey,
Nay.
Aye.
Name.
Aye.
Motion fails. All right, now we can move on to the discussion of the student board representative. Hi, Sarah. In the past, we had a policy that allowed a student board a representative to the board. It's attached. It's not very specific about how that person would be selected, but it's fairly vague, but it does give a list of, it does tell you about the responsibilities, how that person would participate in board meetings. And the question would be, do we want would we want to revive that policies to allow that to occur?
I kind of like this policy. It happened because we were at the WSB Day at the Capitol today that we were talking with Steve Zock, who's the board president at Oregon, and he said they do have a student representative. He said they had one for a couple of years and they didn't have one for a couple of years, but they have one this year. But they have a student council, and he said pretty much it's automatically their student council president, and they had 2 students do it this year, because they also meet twice a month. They have the same required expectations that you attend all the board meetings and that you get the information and all that. So they had one person do it for the first semester and one person do it for the second semester. And because I asked him what the selection process was, having read this and remember that we didn't have one. And at the time we had this policy, in fact, we did have a student council, and I think that we just kind of threw it to them, and they had a selection process, and there were, as we said, 1 or 2 people who had done it. So that would be something I'd be interested in talking more with Sarah about at some point, about if she had some ideas on how we could select, since we don't have an actual student council at this point. But the idea that it would be somebody that could serve for a full year, and it could certainly, the semester idea was an interesting thought to me too, because I think it ends up being a lot for students. He did say that when it gets to an exam time, they don't expect them to show up at the meetings, because that's difficult, which makes sense to me. But it's a significant time commitment for a student, so I'd be open to considering either one each semester or for the year or whatever.
Anyone else?
We can kind of play that by ear, right, if there's interest.
Well, and often what we do is
Sure.
we draft a policy like this, and I think the policy is adequate. It says we may appoint a student. Basically, you could have an administrative rule that gives you a process, and then you bring forward the student name. It could come from wherever your administrative process allows that to happen. Then you could change it if you needed to. Let's say one year the students don't want the student council president, they want somebody else from some other
Oh,
venue.
right, yeah.
Then Dan could change that.
I wasn't suggesting that
No.
we have the process. I was
No.
just thinking it's something we need to talk about,
Yeah,
since
but
there's
if
not
you-
a structure.
If they wanted something that was more formalized, so that people would understand what it is, you could do it in an administrative role if you wanted to, or not.
Does anybody else have thoughts? Yes or no, we think this is a good idea.
I like the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, anybody want to hang out with over 40-year-old people? You
I
know,
mean, I don't think it's
till
gonna be that much
midnight,
fun,
yeah, sure.
Yes.
Let them have fun too.
but it's a good rating process.
I like the idea too, and I wouldn't mind splitting it. I wouldn't do more than split it, because I do think if somebody's doing it, it should be a commitment. I mean, I do think they should I do like the idea of them, and every time I've heard of it being used, it is a commitment. They do, like Madison does it, I know, and it's the same person for a year. And they are expected, same expectations. And certainly in policy, I would,
Do you know if
Before
there's
you
a
bring
new
this back-
policy on that?
I was gonna say, before you bring this back, I would look at Oregon, since I know they have one. I'd probably look at Madison's and just see, they may be the WASB, this is the WASB policy, so. And if you have those, that'd be awesome, yeah. Sure, yeah.
Look at that,
Right,
prepared,
yeah.
oh my
Well, I
God,
don't,
yeah.
you know,
Let's put it up.
personally, I'm not prepared to sort of discuss the
Oh,
details of that policy.
No,
And I was
not to
just-
discuss it, no, I know,
She's
she's got
getting us
copies,
resources.
she would give us
No,
copies.
no, I know what I'm saying is I
All
think,
about resources.
that's fine, thank you very much, but I think at this point, what we just want to do is refer it to the policy committee
Sure.
to consider. We have a draft policy in our own policy, and you can consider
Right.
the other things. And mostly, we want to know if there was a consensus on the board to consider this, and I am hearing one, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roll call?
No, we don't.
No.
Sounds fine.
I'll share.
Okay.
when you-
Go ahead, Dan, go ahead,
Yeah.
you had it.
So I also just did a little bit of follow-up with a couple area superintendents. Oregon was one that I spoke with, same information you received. Reedsburg has had it for many years, and is their student council president that always serves. And then Fort Atkinson has had one where there's not a formal process, they found a volunteer to appoint. One of the questions I had, for those superintendents is, well, how many board meetings do you have a month? Because one of the things that, talking to Dr. Frost, is back when the board had that, the challenge was finding someone willing to do it and commit. And so both Fort Atkinson and Reedsburg only have one board meeting a month. Oregon sounds like 1.5, he said some month two and
Well,
some
They have
one.
two, he said they have two usually.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
would,
talked to him today.
Right,
I wouldn't ask, in policy, I wouldn't expect more than once a month from a representative. If that means missing a meeting, that's fine, but we do, like all the policy, we discuss twice, and so I
We
don't
could
see
do
an
a
issue.
one semester appointment if the same person is doing good and wants to go again, they could get reappointed.
just ideas, it's
That'd
okay.
be easy enough.
But I wouldn't see any issue of just saying in the policy that the expectation is that you require attend once a month. Simply because if we want somebody to do this, they're gonna have to not, we're not gonna have not too much of a time commitment. Susan?
I don't agree. I think if this student, that's one of the reasons we haven't had one, was because we didn't have anybody that was able to make that commitment. So if we have somebody that's willing to make that commitment and wants to, then we can fill the spot. If we don't fill it. That's what we did for years. We had this policy for years. I don't remember there being any student rep during our time, but there had been in the past. But if they're going to, the board meets twice a month. It says right here, if you want to be on the board, then that's what you do. If you want to be on a committee, then you're supposed to either be there when you can. There are going to be times you can't be there. We understand that. But I wouldn't just say you only have to come half the time. That doesn't make any logical sense.
I
Well,
like the idea that
Susan,
Susan,
Eric?
maybe splitting it with the semesters,
Well, we could
Yeah.
certainly offer that, if
There's
there
a
if
lot
there are
of-
people who are interested, I think that's good,
You
yeah.
could
Correct.
change
easier to
every
commit per
month.
semester.
Right, right.
I think that one of the reasons that we didn't have participation while we had that policy in place was because of the time commitment. And I think it makes perfect sense to me that you get the student input part-time. It makes perfect sense to me. But that's something to consider later on.
Yeah, we can take-
You can take a
Sure.
thought
We
and
just
look
have
at a
different
policy.
opinions.
Yeah, exactly. We can have different
Well,
opinions.
and we met once a
About
month.
that.
We met once a month, and we didn't have a student rep when we met once a month.
Here's,
So
well,
I
here's the
don't-
other thing, I thought we were thinking we might even talk about maybe meeting once a month next year, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
We might
it's
talk about
possible.
that. Might
So
come
that
up.
can change too,
Yeah,
so,
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
we can talk about all that,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
But I want to make this accessible.
Sure, I get that.
My point is to make this accessible.
Oh, it's
So
gonna be
let's-
successful. These younger people now are really getting involved in politics and wanna know, because they know this is a crazy world, so.
Thank you,
I
Andrew,
applaud you.
for talking about it.
I always think about you, Eric.
All right, I think we know where we're going to go with this.
Do we need a?
No, you can take that.
Well, we can
We're
fix
just
that.
gonna take it to,
Yeah.
okay, so the board, we have board consensus
right.
that we'll build a policy and we'll bring it back for
Yeah.
first reading, right? Is that right?
Yeah,
Sounds good.
Susan? I would would just ask that when you consider alternate policies, just when you start this consideration, send those alternate policies to the board.
Sure.
Point it out to us when we've got that so that we can get input early on.
Well, so, Peter,
Yes.
so we have a policy committee, and basically what we do is we research policy, and if you want our resources that we use when we research policy, that's great. So, for instance, the video cameras, we probably looked at 3 or 4 policies. If the board wants, either you delegate to the policy committee, we research these. We research the law that's cited under it, whether or not that language looks good to us. Then we come to the board. If you want to have discussion, we welcome that.
I just had the discussion a moment ago with the chair of the committee, and she agreed to what I asked, so it's no problem. We can move on.
So I will say that one of the things to assure the board, we will look at other policies, and we sincerely appreciate when people bring them to us to save us that research piece. So I'm saying thank you.
And
I
actually,
appreciate it.
just point of information, Katie just offered to go make copies for everybody of those policies, so you'll get them
Great.
tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
For why do we have a
Moving on to staff health care benefits. You want to talk that?
Sure, I'll start, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jared to explain the attached document. So we have a healthcare benefits committee, as you're aware, and the committee has met twice in the past few months. Met back, I don't recall the exact date, a few months ago to talk about kind of the parameters. We went out through our consultant to get quotes from our current providers as well as others in the area, and met last night to look at that, and we had a little bit of a discussion philosophically about the benefits, about what's important to our employees, as well as the actual rates and costs. It's an excellent committee that really gets health insurance and how it works. And so what we had mentioned is that we would have this on the board agenda for discussion. At some point, the board's going to have to decide, make a decision on a health insurance contract beginning next January 1 of 2020 is what ours expires. And this committee will be making a recommendation to the board with regard to that benefit, but we'd like to provide a little bit of guidance to that committee with respect to what the board would like to see specifically when it comes to costs and parameters and so on. So tonight is the first discussion in an attempt to make sure all the board members are up to speed on what our current plan is, what our comparables are to other districts, and what that real fiscal impact is on our budget. And so there are 3 documents attached that help tell that story. And with that, I'll have Jared go through this.
All right. So the first document that I would ask you to look at is what's labeled Associated Benefits Health Insurance Grid. And what this grid is so we work with Associated Financial to assist us in looking at our health insurance. And so some history to that is prior to the district having Dean and Physicians Plus, now Quartz, the district was part of the state health insurance plan, which, if you're not aware, the state health insurance plan is pretty much told how we are going to participate, what those increases on an annual basis is going to look like, what your insurance plan looks like, and that ultimately comes from the state of Wisconsin, the Department of Employee Trust Funds. And so what we had experienced was some very large number increases on an annual basis. And then obviously as when Act 10 came in place, it required us to have our staff members' contributions increase tremendously to the 12.6%. And then the law only specifically referred to participants of the state health insurance plan. So we do know that a number of districts across the state took that literal and made these changes to their plans, which they weren't required by law. The other part of it is since we were part of the state health insurance plan, our retirees that were leaving were also being challenged because obviously there were individuals that were choosing to leave. They weren't necessarily ready to leave and they might wanted to go work someplace else. However, since we were belonging to the state health insurance plan, not only were they being penalized for the WRS side of things, they were also being penalized on the health insurance, even though that was part of our teacher retirement package. So if they worked for another district that was part of WRS and started to do that, but put their pension on hold, they could no longer be part of our health insurance plan, even though that employer was not offering state health insurance. The other part of it is like I said, we pretty much just had to sit back, and if the state wasn't making changes to their prescription drugs or plan changes, we really didn't have control of our destination when we look at total compensation. So we consulted with Associated Financial. They brought in a number and received a number of RFIs, which is requests for information, and to see what we could do. So what the goal was is we moved off the state health insurance plan. We surveyed the staff, and it was very clear the staff wanted dual choice, because with the state health insurance plan, you offered a number of different providers. So that was very key to our staff wanting to continue dual choice. And so that's how we got to where we're at today. We moved off of the state health insurance plan 2 years ago, and we offered Dean and Physicians Plus. And then this January, Physicians Plus was taken over by Quartz, and so now we offer Dean and Quartz. So where we're at right now is our contract ends in January of 2020, and so at the same time that other school districts are going out, because their plan years start on July 1. So there are some school districts that will start on July 1, some start on January 1st, and so we've really came together as a group of not only Dane County school districts, but some of the school districts surrounding, and have worked with Associated Financial, which has actually teamed up with CISA to really facilitate some of these conversations. And obviously, we all have different needs and expectations, and obviously where our employees are coming from to work. So there's obviously different requirements for what our staff wants based on where the providers have to be located at versus just making a choice for them. So this grid here puts together all the school districts in this area that is working with Associated Financial. And then what it shows you is if they have one choice, it just names it. If they have two choices, it lists both of those out. And then it walks down the majority, or the major bullet points of the plan. So it talks about if they have a deductible or no deductible. It talks about if there's any co-insurance or co-pays. Is there any cost to the employee for office visits? And then also talks about prescription drugs. And then it talks about what the premium is, and then the percentage that the employer contributes and the employee. One of the conversations that came out of last night was wanting to get this grid updated. I did reach out to Al, and we're all on the same point. Not everybody, even though there are some July 1 renewals, they have not finalized. They're making plan tweaks. So this gets us through the end of this year. So as we continue to receive additional information and tweaks, which we can see here, it's a 2-page thing, and ours is on the second page. And if you look at us, we are, like I said before, a dual choice. We actually offer Dean and Quartz, but we also offer 3 plans with each of those. There's the HMO, there's a PPO, and then there's the POS. Majority of our employees participate in the HMO because that has a network where our retirees or individuals that might live outside of Dane County might have chosen the PPO or the POS thing. But currently we do not have any deductible or copays. The only copay that we do have is a $60 visit to the ER. If you are admitted to the ER within 24 hours, then that copay is waived. But other than that, and then our prescription drug copays are $5, $15, and I just lost it. I can't read. 35. So that's, but obviously with no deductible, the total out of pockets, is at that $6,000 to $8,000, which would apply to the prescription drugs. And you can currently see that the district contributes 95% of the HMO. And then that HMO sets that threshold. So if someone chooses the POS or the PPO, where the district is still only paying 95% of the HMO premium. And then a PPO and a POS premium is typically more expensive, but the district is still. So we talk about paying 95%, which for employees that are on the HMO, they're truly paying only a 5%. Something that was nice about switching over to having insurance sort of in-house is if you recall on the state plan, there was a number of plans, and they would always take that number based off the lowest premium. So it wasn't truly a true dual choice or a choice for employees. A lot of employees were sort of forced to insurance providers based on the cost. And so one year we might have Dean being the low provider, which is where that percentage, and then the next year we would see Unity drop, and then we would see all these individuals drop, obviously, I don't want to say playing the game, but obviously trying to manage, because there wasn't necessarily large increases that were coming into people's paychecks, especially as we saw, Act 10, employees had to pick up paying their half of WRS and trying to manage that. So that's what this grid is just showing you where we're at compared to other districts that participate in this process with Associated Financial. It's been a great process because we were able to actually, back in February, we hosted the actual interviews where 40 school districts came here to the third floor, and we brought in the 3 major players, and we're able to have some conversation with them, letting them know that we're all in this together, and we need to partner. We can't just sit back and wait for the healthcare providers to tell us what they're going to do. So we're continuing to build off of that relationship to really try to focus on bringing, because every school is a little different. Wanakee and some other schools have actually on-site clinics. Some, obviously locations where there's a clinic right down the street, so they have the ability to do that. The next item that I would like you to pull up is classified as the health insurance comparables, Dane County financials using Associated Financial data. And what I did here, and I did show this with the Personnel Committee back in October, and as Susan will point out, so when we did the RFI for this upcoming year, we had to take a census and send to all the health insurance. And so what the health insurance committee received last night, that there was, a number, and then the district has a different number, because on a monthly basis, we do have people that elect to have health insurance, or perhaps is leaving for maternity leave, and so they don't have FMLA, which will drop the health insurance, and so it is still fluid. So if you see numbers fluctuating by, 5 to 7 employees, that's typically what it is because typically, we're going to try to do a costing at one point and trying to keep that consistent. The health insurance is going to do an RFI on a specific date and time as well. But anyway, so this here is a comparable data. So if we take that grid that we just talked about, and we apply our census to that. So taking the first line is Monona Grove, is that the employee pays 5% of the HMO, the employer pays 95%. So right now, a total premium for a single plan is just shy of $7,900 on a yearly basis, and for a family plan, it's shy of $19,700. But when you break that down, the district's actually paying about $7,500 for single and about $18,500 for family. Then if we were to apply what some of the other districts' premiums are in contribution, this just shows you what the potential impact would look like if we made that switch over and trying to compare apples to apples. And just one quick comparison, if we were to use DeForest plans and their premiums along with their employee contributions, comparing that to our district, there's roughly about $385,000 worth of savings. Now, what I want to caution you on is we're using their percentage and we're using their premium. When a premium is determined, it talks about your current medical trends. So we don't know necessarily what's exactly happening at DeForest or at the other school districts. What we can tell you is we know if they have a deductible, if they have copays, but if they happen to have a younger staff, their medical trends could be a little different. So we will never be able to match another school district's premiums penny for penny. But what we can do is we can start looking at if we do perhaps need to make tweaks or changes to our plan on either the percentage side that we're contributing or the employees contributing, or plan changes of deductibles, copays, prescription changes. So this is just a data piece for you to sort of see where we sort of sit compared to other schools in the ones that we compare with in Dane County. And especially as we eventually will start talking about total compensation, you can see that, obviously if we were able to do that, where those funds could potentially come from.
Is there a reason why you left your father off here?
Is there a reason why Middleton Cross Plains is on there twice?
Yep, so if you look at the grid, Middleton Cross Plains offers two different types of plans. And to be honest, like we can't, it doesn't tell us how many employees, so some of it says that if you take this plan, they do a dual choice based on, we're gonna go 95% of this plan and 95% of this plan, where most of the school districts just does the 95%. So they do have two different rates, and that's just showing you that. And McFarland does not participate in our group, so that's, I don't have their information.
They haven't shared them. Susan?
So has there been discussion on the committee of just, of not changing the contribution necessarily, but going to co-pays? I mean, could you save enough by doing that? And my only thought there is that not every, that wouldn't affect everybody. I mean, it would affect obviously people who need it more, but,
So last night was the first night that the committee was able to see what our proposals for next year and the year after is looking like. So there was obviously a lot of conversation, and just like when we try to run different scenarios, there's 100 different scenarios you could look like.
Right.
So the goal of the committee last night was to introduce to them, walk through what the process is, and sort of got some feedback from our staff. And I think Susan can talk about what she took away from the staff were concerned about. Are they looking at contribution side? Are they looking on premium side for making plan changes? But we just started that conversation, and we also said that we needed to bring this information to the board to sort of get some direction to come back to them. Because if the board says, hey, we want to try to push any increase into salaries, then that means that the committee needs to go to work and say, well, we could maybe change the contribution, or we could tweak our plan. But we've left all that open right now, and Al is also going back and getting some more specifics about what if we made this tweak, what does the premium look like?
Oh, please, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna add too that, again, this sheet is incredibly valuable, and if you're really interested in looking at it in greater depth. So, you know, if you're looking at these numbers and you say Monona Grove pays 95%, the forest is right up there paying 90%. Well, then the truth is you gotta look at the DeForest plan. And the DeForest plan has $250 and $500 deductibles on it, with a $500 and $1,000 out-of-pocket max. So even though they're paying 90% and 10%, it's very possible that each of those families are out of pocket up to $500.
Correct.
Because of the plan. Very, very few of the plans, when you compare them, have basically zero deductible, which we have, 100% co-insurance. I mean, very few of the, Madison is the only one that kind of comes close. I can see, I mean, it's,
So I'll just add, clearly the employees, the people on the committee would love to see, no plan change, and get to where we have. We did talk about, well, what if we need to reduce costs? Where would be the things you'd want to look at? Again, there was no consensus last night, but some of the discussion was around that idea of equity. And if you have co-pays and deductibles, does it hit some families harder than others? And that there was discussion, well, maybe that wouldn't be as fair as if we did have to do something, maybe just employee contribution towards premiums across the board might be a more fair way, but by no means was that consensus, but that was just some of the initial discussion, last night. And so, like I said, it's a really good group. They understand that impact piece, and so that's, I think, where they'll pick up the discussion next time.
Susan?
well, yeah, I mean, co-pays, I would think would hurt younger families with young kids more, for one thing. But my concern about raising the contribution is then we're just trying to talk about trying to increase salary, and we're taking it back out of their pockets again. So I mean, it's just, we clearly have to have a discussion about it, but it's not an easy one.
Okay.
Are we at a point where we're saying we need to make a change, or are we just looking at this to see where we are?
The latter, yeah, just informational, was, initial discussion about that, but there is no recommendation at this time.
One thing I noticed from the chart is that there aren't very many districts that offer coverage to eligibility at 20 hours a week. What is the impact of that? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I haven't run that number. I mean, obviously, we've talked about it briefly, but we haven't dug into it that far. And I think that brings into a good point. If you open up the third attachment, it's the health insurance financial overview. And so right now for the 18-19 year, we're looking at the health insurance budget of just being over $6 million. And that does not include the 1.1 or 1.2 million that we pay for retiree health insurance from that grandfather side. So this is just truly active employees. What does that increase look like over last year? It's a 12.7% increase. The 12.7 is not because we received a 12.7% increase in premiums. We actually had a cap in at 7.9, and that's what we received. We actually had a large number of families move over to, I shouldn't say all families, individuals move over to our plan, which ultimately resulted in a 12.7. And it's something that we're starting to see more on a monthly basis. For example, we do know that there are some school districts that are making some major changes. And I just received an email a couple of weeks ago from one of our staff members asking how do they get on our plan because their spouse's insurance company is changing. Okay, I know that we had a handful of spouses that were part of the Madison Fire Department. They made major changes this summer. They are now part of our. We obviously believe in offering health insurance to our employees, but obviously there's that conversation of, if we're not making plans and changes, then they are. But that's a decision that the board we need to talk about. So what you can see here on the enrollment side, we have 482 positions. Of those 482 positions, 459 are actually eligible because of our threshold of less than 20 hours a week. So it doesn't answer your question specifically, Peter, because I can't tell you what that looks like, but it tells you that 95% of all of our positions are actually eligible to enroll into health insurance. Now, not all 95 we pay 100% because obviously we do a proration. So the proration pretty much works the same for all groups except for teacher groups, where if you are a 76% or fuller to a full FTE for teachers, we contribute at a full-time rate. Support staff and everybody else is a true proration, which means that if you're 80%, it's prorated at 80%, and so their individuals' premiums do increase a little bit because of that FTE. So 300, we actually have people at 87% participation rates in our health insurance, which means there are 398 plans. Of those 398, 78 are single plans, 320 are family plans. And like I said, the numbers that we shared with the insurance company had a census of like 7 people less than that, but we can explain to you why that is. But then if you look at 17-18, we actually, over the previous year of 16-17, we only saw a 7.9%, which was our cap. So we netted out really meeting our cap based on the contract. And then you can see the year that we made the switch. Obviously there was a very small increase into our health insurance, and that was part of the justification of why we made some of those changes when we switched over. We also made a change to the contribution. We went down to that 5%. And there was really a net zero impact to our budget, and that was the decision behind that. But then you can look at the 15, 16, 14, 15. We were looking at just shy of 10% or just shy of 6%. But ultimately, over the last 5 years, we're seeing a health insurance increase of, a 1.5, just shy of $2 million. And so when we talk about total compensation, how does that look? But Susan brings up a very valid point. It's easy for us to go back and maybe make a plan change and we lower our premiums or we change contributions. But then when we do comparables, we're looking at that raw data. We don't really look at what that take-home pay looks like. But that's something that you just got to keep in mind, that when you're making those decisions, it might affect one employee one way or one group one way, completely different another way.
And I would say on the other side of the coin, when we look at comparative data for our salaries of our staff, and we need to understand that we're looking at their gross salaries, not net. And so understand our staff has a lot less taken out than our comparable districts. And so take-home pay, is more, so it's hard when we start looking at comparables. We need to, make sure that we understand that.
What?
There.
why is the discussion always seem to be like we want to be comparable with everybody else? Why can't we have the discussion as we want to be better than everybody else? Is there a reason why that's not the discussion? Because it seems like everybody's discussing, let's be comparable to other districts. If we have better health insurance and we have a very competitive salary, then, you know, what's wrong with keeping it like that so we maintain the teachers and the good staff that we have and we attract new
Well, I think we're all in agreement that would be great to have. The simple answer is, and I'm not mean to be flippant, revenue limits. I mean, that's why we can.
So because of that then, is there an anticipation that other districts will be changing theirs as well? Because they have the same revenue limits that we're
Sure.
dealing with.
You know, I would comment that we do have an issue with having our salaries competitive with other comparable districts. It's not, you know, we have some work to do, I think, to have equitable salaries. And you can argue, well, we're trading this off against healthcare, but it's all part of that's part of the discussion. And what other folks are doing is an important part to understand. If, as you say, we want to have a competitive compensation package.
Well, it seems like to me, in the health insurance, we're not only competitive, we're one of the best
Yeah.
in Dane County.
Yeah. But in salary, we're not. And it's getting the right balance that allows us to attract and train the people, retain the people we
Right,
want.
but then you get to the fact of taking away from one that's not only competitive but the best, and then moving into the other to bring it up. But then, you know, I'd be curious to see what the staff thinks. You know, what like a simple survey of rating the importance of health insurance in the district, and compare that to salary. Like, you know, if we maintain the health insurance plan now, are you satisfied with the salary that we have now?
We have
If-
surveyed, and the answer is no.
And it's no.
Sure. And which is natural. I mean,
Right.
you'd want to
That
have
we've
both.
done that survey.
Yeah,
When was that done?
annually.
This
In our annual staff engagement survey, those are
20
two specific questions that are on there.
28, this
So
20.
the last one would have been last spring,
So that would be spring of 2018.
18.
So we'll be doing another one this year.
Yeah.
So we're doing another one in spring in 2019.
Correct, yes.
I'd be curious to
And
wait
and the
see.
general answer is, as you might expect, staff are generally pleased with their benefits, not pleased with salary.
Right, but is there a question that says if there was a, you know, if we raised your salary and that affected the health insurance,
There is not.
can we add that? Can we at least maybe,
Maybe a way to frame that
We
question. Yeah,
could
yeah.
add it a year from now, the survey is in
It's
the
already
queue.
Sorry.
it's already queued up already.
But there is the possibility of the health insurance advisory committee putting together
Discuss that.
something, working with
And from
Katie.
there, the answer is loud and clear.
Yep.
Right.
No,
Yep.
they wouldn't support a shift.
They wouldn't support the
Would
shift.
not, no.
I think with everybody else making their plans worse, that makes ours more important for them,
Yeah.
obviously, right? By the amount of people that
Right.
have started to join our.
And,
It also ensures that we retain staff.
yeah.
Right.
And communication is really key in this, and that's an opportunity for us, because as you might guess, it's such a complex issue. When we hire younger staff who really aren't that well versed on their health, they look at salary. When we hire an experienced teacher from another district that comes here, they get it, you know. And the teachers that have been here their whole career may or may not realize our benefit level compared to others. And so that's where I think we have an opportunity to, you know, make our staff better informed.
Susan?
We actually talked about that in the committee because the teachers themselves said, I think first of all, there are a lot of teachers who don't understand the benefit that they're receiving. They don't understand you pay 95 and they only pay 5%. They don't understand that they have no deductible. And one of the teachers said they don't even understand what deductible means because they've never paid one, never. Effectively, unless they're in the ER. And I remember when that email came out, what was that, 2 years ago? And they were just they couldn't imagine what had happened. And that's because that's the only thing we have the copay on is a $60.
Prescription drug coverage usually has to be
Right.
Yeah, it has
So,
companies,
yeah,
yeah,
but
sorry.
They see it
They were
there.
talking more about,
Right.
yeah, you're absolutely right.
You know, one of my concerns is that when I hear things like, well, Madison Fire and Police, because of their changes, those folks don't move over to our plan. You know, why, you know, you have the issue of Monona Grove taxpayers essentially subsidizing the other public employees instead of spending those dollars on education. I mean, it costs us out of pocket, it costs us our teachers, and puts us at a disadvantage. And I'm all for providing health care for people, but I want to make sure that our taxpayers get the most benefit of locally with education dollars. And I want to understand what we can do to deal with that. And if our plan means that we spend an extra $500,000 on health insurance that we wouldn't be spending, then that's, to me, is a significant problem we've got to address. Susan?
So the other thing we talked about was to add a deductible often is a disincentive to get the health care. And if you have a discussion with teachers now, they feel quite pressured about a reduction in the ability to get a substitute for them if they're sick or they need something. And so they understand that there is again, you add a deductible, there's a disincentive to go for minimally the wellness visit, much less to go in when you're sick. You wait until you're really sick, and then by that time you're out for 3 days. If you're paying a $250 deductible when you go to see the doctor. So they're having those discussions, and it's really a great group of people having the discussions because they have a variety of healthcare needs. One family talks about never going to the doctor, and another family talks about going a lot. You know, it's a variety of healthcare needs.
I think.
And they change on a daily basis.
Just varies.
When
I know.
when I look at the chart, wellness care, routine preventive care is covered at 100% right across the board. Not everybody's plan. All right, any other comments, discussion? Do you need anything from us at this point?
Well, one thing that when we go back to the committee, is this something that at this point the board feels that you would like to, have some guidelines about, where we fit into the budget, some parameters with here's what we want to do, or the other option is, well, we don't know enough about the budget yet, and maybe we need to just take a little bit of time to consider this. I guess I would agree it's premature to say, direct the committee to say, we'll come back with a plan with this percent increase. I don't know if we know that.
I'd like to wait to see.
Yeah, I'd rather wait on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the concern I have, there's two parts to this. One is, what's this balance, at no net difference to the district, what's the right balance between, co-pays and salary and contributions and salary, you got no net cost to the district. And the other thing is, are there areas that we can get net savings so that we have more money to put on the salary schedule? And I don't want to just take that out of their teacher's pocket to put it on the salary schedule necessarily, but if we, change providers, go to one provider or whatever it is, add a provider, I don't know what those things are, but if there's places where there are pure net savings that can be made, I would strongly encourage the committee to consider those and pursue those, with the understanding that if it's net savings, that goes on to teachers' salary, the teachers' bottom line, increases their bottom line.
The one challenge with that, or the other factor is it's not just teachers. And we look at compensation of support staff, every group's a little bit different about, where we're at there as far as being competitive or not. And so I think we'd all agree that we don't want to take money out of the pocket of any employee.
Right.
We
want to put more into any employee.
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion about teacher salaries. We haven't had much about some of the other employee we have to be cognizant of that as well.
Susan?
Well, and one of the questions was if there were a plan, so we looked at the percentage of people involved in the two plans we currently offer, and if in the event there was a plan that offered less, would you discuss changing your offerings? And that answer from the committee at this time, and they're still exploring and having discussion, was no, because there are this many, the number was huge in one particular plan, was large, 75%. And that meant for all of those people, you had to change your providers. So that balance wasn't something that they wanted to explore at this time. It's still open discussion. It's totally open discussion because everything's still in huge flux. But I want to assure you that the teachers are looking at all of these details and trying to determine how other teachers feel about it. And they are seriously talking about a survey.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Okay. Facilities planning update?
Okay, two things. First of all, as far as kind of the nuts and bolts about what are the things that have happened in the last week and a half, or since last week when we had the board workshops, there's a list of items, and I think they're fairly self-explanatory, so instead of reading them, if there's any questions on any particular item there, we can talk about that in more detail. The other thing that's not in the written report with regard to communication, we are in the process of having information meetings at every individual school. So we started last night with Winnicott, and that was Cottage Grove School, and we'll eventually hit every school where they're getting a similar presentation the board got in the workshop, not quite as detailed, but just really where we're at in the process. Here's what's been happening so far with the conceptual plans, and then really specifically in their particular building, what kind of work is slated to be done, and then also talking about the opportunity that they're going to have coming up to actually sit down, as appropriate with architects and for the work in their building and so on. And so I'd say those first two informational meetings went really well. Lots of good comments and questions, and so that's where we're at.
Susan?
One of the feedback pieces that I've gotten since we had the presentation, which, as I understood it, was that there needed to be further study in relation to the cafeteria plan at Glacial Drum One. So until there was further study, that might be delayed a year.
Correct.
There's significant concern about that because the staff, the ones who spoke to me, seem to feel that that's has a seriously detrimental effect on the students in the building because of the way they have to be seated, the way they have to be moved through the lines, and I think what they were asking for is there any other way that you can minimally help fix that problem to reduce the detrimental effects.
Right. And everyone is concerned
So
about
I'm
that.
just bringing that back.
Yeah, and the other thing, I guess I want to clarify, the original plan was never to do that work this summer because of the time commitment, the planning. We did ask our team to put that on the fast track to see if it could be put together. And so we came up with a preliminary option that, as we talked about, just not acceptable. It's not going to fix the problem. And so there really is not time to fix it correctly, for this summer. And everyone is well aware it's been an issue for 10 years since the day the building opened. But like we talked about, we want to make sure when we do have the solution, it's the right solution, and not spend a significant amount of money for a partial solution.
So I think though they were wondering if there could be continuing administrative exploration about a way to use space differently that would reduce some of the detrimental effect. I don't know whether it's a community building, but you've got
Community room.
community room, you've got other staff there now. I'm not saying you make a remodeling decision. Is there anything you can do in the way you use that space?
Well, we'll be meeting with GDS staff next week, and one of the messages is every and all input and ideas are welcome. So if a teacher hasn't figured out, please tell us, because we can't, there's, at this point, no, there are no solutions to the problem short of more space and more serving lines. But absolutely, yeah, that discussion and dialogue is welcome, and so we'll have that message directly with those teachers next week.
But the message sounds like there's nothing we can do to help you. Unless they come up with an idea.
Well, probably,
I'm saying
that's
that's
probably
our,
true.
we've got the experts.
Having worked at Winnequa Middle School when it was well beyond capacity for 10 years, and we had very crowded cafeterias, we talked about it all the time, there was nothing that could be done. I mean, I don't want to sound
The
callous
solution is
about it, but the
addition
truth
and
is,
more serving
we
lines.
have to fix it, and it's a big fix, and it's got to be fixed right. So I don't know that there are any.
If we could have fixed it without rearranging the building,
We would do it.
We would have
It'd
done
be
it
way
already.
cheaper, yeah,
We've done it
yeah.
the first year.
So I think that's the bad news.
That's the
It is bad news, but that's the news.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some of those same people who went through it at Winnequa are going through it again. So, yeah.
Right, anything else? Future meeting dates. Community engagements is the 19th. There's a board meeting the 20th. And then a list, anybody,
Yeah, I'd just like to confirm, we talked about, again, kind of reserving that first Wednesday of the month for special meetings. And I think we agreed that we would like to have another facilities workshop on that first. I want to confirm that was everyone's understanding and.
Talking about the 3rd
Yes,
at 6:30?
yes.
okay. Ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?